Before I really get into the plan, I just wanted to speak a little bit to this. I wanted to speak to this idea of why a plan in context of this overlay. You know, the puzzle picture on the right speaks to this idea that there are a lot of stakeholders and there are a lot of pieces. Even when you look at the land holdings in which we're working, there are a number of pieces. And so I think the idea of creating a shared community vision that everyone understands and can plug into is really important on a project like this. Because as land begins to develop slowly over time, we begin to create context for other landowners. And I think our goal is to create a framework from which everyone can benefit and work together to make something great. And so that's really what community building is all about. And I think together we can create something that's better than the sum of the parts. We can discuss how to align self-interest and community interest. And I think the hope is to be clear about what the impacts and rewards of growth can be. And I think one of our goals here is to understand what does positive impact, what would it be? We've spent a lot of time analyzing the land, looking at it, but from a sense, it's from an outsider's point of view. And what we haven't really benefited from is the broader community. We have been working on calibrating some ideas using the support of staff and the committee that we've been working with, but we really look forward to hearing from the broader community. What are the concerns? What did we get right? What did we miss? Because we want to be able to take this feedback and start to work it into these ideas and make sure that we're kind of measuring twice, cutting once. So we have spent some time reviewing the work that's been done in the community thus far. We've been involved in the project now since about September. And we have tried to understand many of the key objectives in this village plan, village overlay. And what we're trying to do is take it to a finer level of resolution, or not resolution as much as ideation, so that we can, check again, measure again. And where we started is really thinking through, what is Hoytsville today and what can it be tomorrow? Because we see that this village overlay is really a system or a method for incrementally growing Hoytsville over time. As Cameron said, this stuff isn't going to fall out of the sky, but it's going to happen slowly. We're going to get to learn as we go and evolve. So think of it as a bit of a laboratory for growth when context of Hoytsville. And so we're searching for what we would call the DNA of Hoytsville. What are the building blocks that we can amplify and build on so that as we go, the place still looks familiar and feels like Hoytsville. So we've done some documentation of existing systems. And so as we start to look at the development plan within the community, we've noticed some things that the way development has occurred thus far is highly irregular. It's very organic in character. We see that it's assembled out of a lot of smaller buildings, smaller roof forms and varied roof forms, organized around parking courts and courtyards, all off of Hoytsville Road. And so there's something about this pattern that's actually really fascinating and interesting, and it tells us maybe we should be looking at buildings that are smaller, and maybe we should be thinking about, some outbuilding character and scale. How do we house the trailers and the side-by-sides? And, it seems like it's already being done here in these little buildings. And so we started to think about, can you draw from this pattern and this character and incrementally add on to the community using this sense of scale? What's also interesting is that growth happens in very clustered areas surrounded by farmland and green space. And so there's something about that, I think, too, that would be, compelling. As we look at the landscape character, it's really stunning, these meadows surrounded by mountains. And I think the goal is to kind of stay below the tree lines, not interrupt the hillsides, let them stay as open space and perhaps provide trails and access into them. Some of the landscaping or farming implements are pretty interesting. Even the way the fences are built might be something that we pick up on. And I think we'd like to take some of the character and patterns that already exist here and use it in the extension of the plant. There's a little wire fence behind the tube steel fencing, and even the patterning on that, the colors that are rusted material or is it painted white. These are all things that are fascinating to us that we probably can implement in the plan. Even the dirt or gravel roads, there's something about that that helps identify or define Hoytsville. So what if those roads became like gravel bike trails or side-by-side trails that are integrated into the community with recreation? So the goal would be to have those things that help define what Hoytsville is today. How do we keep them and integrate them into a network of amenities? On the architectural side, it's really fascinating to see how the historic buildings were worked into the character of the community. I mean, what this tells us is that maybe some early farmers wanted to sort of maximize the continuity of the land, and they pulled their homes close to the street. These streets are fairly, have this nice rural character to them. They're not over-engineered. And so there's something about the character of the streets, the fencing, even the power poles or the telephone poles and the tall grasses on either side that speak to the character of what this place is that we wouldn't want to lose as we begin to think about extending or growing incrementally the town. We recognize that there are also larger buildings that are more monumental in character. In the upper left, the Hoyt House and the old, I don't know if that was the Creamery building, but it's got this real Gothic look to it, a strong formality with the stone wall. You can see in the bottom left that another landowner sort of picked up on that language of the stone wall. We have larger farm buildings and varying roof-shaped characters that can influence the thinking of the architectural palette that we can begin working with. As we look at the appeal of this place, we certainly want to be able to amplify those things that make this place special. As I look at the image on the right, I see this open space with roofs and trees sort of dappled into it. And I think part of the idea of the plan concepts that we're beginning to examine is when you grow, how do you not wipe that out? How do you maybe just sort of flex or expand what is developed within that same context? So there are a few more roofs and a few more trees. And so over time, you could probably grow this community without a wholesale sort of change in what its character might be. Some of the things that come to mind as we look at expanding the community of Hoytsville and why this would be an appealing place for people is we recognize that many people that grow up here and move away want to come back, and there's no place to come back to. And some of the reasons for it we tried to list on the left here. It's a beautiful small river valley surrounded by mountains. You have access to the hillside and the Weber River. You're close to Park City. You got the rail trail, close to water skiing and fishing on the reservoirs. Great access to I-80. We perceive a potential for a kind of a hip yet humble architecture that is relatable. Any architecture we build here, we want it to feel like it belongs. So there isn't a jarring contrast between what's already here and what we introduce into the landscape. And then there's the working with the hills, this sort of tiered and layered, character of the place, which we want to be able to maintain. So when we started on the project, this is one of the first diagrams we saw, which was the diagram from the overlay district. And so we've been examining this plan through the lens of what does it mean if we zoom in quite a bit, but then also this is the boundary of the overall overlay, but then there are property owners who have opted into the overlay and those that haven't. And we need to be sensitive to both of those, conditions. And then there's also another layer, which is what is the overlay or the properties within this that we are, in partnership with, where we either own the land now or the land is under contract. So you can see there's a bit of a patchwork quilt. So if we go back to the image of that puzzle, we really do have a puzzle. So as we start to think about, well, who are the landowners within this context, everyone becomes critical in putting this puzzle together and painting a picture of the puzzle so we can know what to expect from each other, know what we're making as